want to just start it? Just
It
start
automatically
We all
starts.
agree that it's recording.
I hope so, but we'll see. Hopefully one
Okay, this one's going though. All right, let's go.
Yeah, let's
Just go.
sit over here. Can you sit over there? Do your work over there.
Yeah, that's good.
So I can see you.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Okay.
please, audience, I need someone to look at. So in the audience, I'm going to look at all your beautiful faces. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Today I'm going to talk to you about your decision whether or not to sell ITS. What I want you to think about today as we go through our presentation is the process of selling your home, a process many of you have probably gone through in the past. When an initial person comes to you and says, I'm interested in buying your house, I'm interested in putting a bid on your house, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to look at your house and you're going to say, how much do I think this is intrinsically worth? Then you're going to go to your neighbors and you're looking at what they sold their homes for in order to get a ballpark range of what you think your home should be worth. Finally, you're going to bring in an appraiser or a real estate agent who's going to tell you, here's exactly what I think your home is worth. Finally, you're going to make a decision about whether or not to sell. That's what we're going to do during today's presentation. Our thesis is that your company is worth $420 million, and that both offers from HGN and from Staffco lowball the value of your company. We're going to recommend that you put your company up for auction, just like you would do for your house, and bring in a variety of bidders to come and bid up the value of your company. Once you receive those bids, if you receive a bid crossing our $420 million threshold, you should take that bid and sell the company. If not, we're going to recommend driving growth internally, focusing on how you can make your business better by entering the China market, which is nascent and ready for growth, and by rolling up smaller companies and growing your market share in this industry. We're going to talk about why this is a fragmented industry where no company has more than 5% market share, and then why that matters for you in terms of your strategy for scaling this business. Jack's going to start by walking you through our M&A recommendations for ITS and thinking about the value of the industry as a whole, what's driving growth in the industry, and how we can grow overall. Then Brandy is going to walk through a comparable analysis of different companies, just like you would look at previous transactions of homes that sold in your block. Then I'm going to walk through the DCF valuation, giving you a tangible value for your company, and looking at how I built up from fundamental value, from basics, into a concrete $420 million to your company. Finally, Michael is going to tell you why this company is valuable. He's going to look at both offers, consider the pros and the cons of the Staffco strategic offer and the HGN financial offer, and finally he's going to tell you what we think you should do and why. But pass it off to Jack to get us started. Thank you so much, David, and thank you again to the ITS board for bringing us in here today to talk about ITS valuation. David has talked about the process of selling a house. My part in this presentation is going to be to focus on thinking about the housing market overall. Are houses selling for high prices or are they selling for low prices? And what type of house do we have? Do we have a luxury house or a low income house? And how is that going to affect our analysis? I'll start off by talking about the broad staffing market in this case. Then I'll move down one layer and think about more specifically the IT staffing market that ITS plays in. And then third, we'll think about ITS itself, our house, and thinking about its competitive advantages within the broader marketplace. With that, let's begin. So first we want to take a look at the staffing industry overall. Staffing is a large, fragmented, and growing market. First is large. We know that the staffing business currently accounts for over $90 billion in annual revenues. 90% of that is coming from the temporary staffing space. So, if my friend Brandy has a business and her top employee leaves, she comes to us, we fill that spot temporarily, or perhaps it's a seasonal business, you need temporary staffing during a particular month, ITS fills that need. The other 10% of the market comes from permanent staffing and executive search if a company's looking for a new CEO or a new CFO or other C-suite executive. By industry, the staffing market is broken down by industrial staffing, clerical and administrative staffing, professional and managerial staffing, healthcare, IT, which accounts for 8.5% of the total market, that's where we play, scientific engineering, and other. What's important to realize is how fragmented the staffing business is. There are over 44,000 other staffing companies that vary widely in size. we have a large majority of those companies operating in the small segment of the market, with 5 to 10 employees, doing temporary staffing for local businesses. Popping up one level, we have those small to medium-sized staffing businesses that serve, the bread and butter of American corporations, the middle market firms, middle market small businesses with 50 to 100 employees. And then at the top level, we have the large staffing conglomerates, which aren't that big actually. The number one player in the space has 5% market share. The top 4 players have 15% market share. And these larger players serve multinationals, some of the Fortune 500 companies in the United States. The third point I wanted to make about the staffing industry is just how fast it's growing. According to IBISWorld, it's expected to grow faster and add more jobs than just about any other industry in the US. This is caused by a structural shift in our economy towards temporary work. According to the Federal Reserve economic data, since the Great Recession, the number of tech staffings has risen by more than 50% to 2.7 million. 3/4 of leading economists believe that this adoption of contract and temp workers is an established trend and will be in the long term. Bottom line is that ITS is an extremely powerful company, not only because its fundamentals, but because of the fundamentals of the industry. Because we're looking at an industry that is growing fast. So even if ITS was a mediocre company, and what we're going to talk to you today is about how it's one of the top, fastest growing in the businesses in the market. But even if it was a steady, average company, the pie itself, the market for staffing services, is itself growing, and that will be a boon for ITS as we think about discounted future cash flows. The market that ITS plays in is not only national, it's also growing internationally. In Canada, a professor from Casper University told the Globe and Mail that you're either a winner or a loser in the labor market. The clear winners are those with stimulating, well-paid jobs, but a lot of others exist in the treadmill of insecurity with limited training and a limited career path. In Belgium, hours clocked by temps exceeded those by non-temps and grew by 10% in Q1. In England, 50% of jobs created between 2010 and 2012 were temp jobs. The bottom line here is that as we think about the future value of ITS as a corporation, we're not just looking at the 16 metropolitan areas that ITS plays in. We're not even looking at the whole US broadly. We're looking at the globe as a potential playground for ITS, for future business, for future clients. But what we've said so far is that this quote-unquote housing market, this larger market in which ITS plays, is growing. But one question remains as we think about future value, and that is, are these value drivers that we talk about sustainable? Will ITS continue to grow in the future, or is this a temporary trend? What we're here to argue today is that the trend towards temporary staffing is a structural one, and that the United States economy has fundamentally shifted towards more temporary labor. We can think about this in a few ways. The tech revolution, minimum wage, and Affordable Care Act. Starting with the tech revolution. We have companies automating processes all the time. And with that automation today comes a need for IT professionals to service those automated processes, to be there in case of failure, and that creates a need for relatively unskilled temporary staffing needs in these companies that ITS fills. Second is the minimum wage. Now we have a push towards a $15 minimum wage in the US, and this has increased pressure on businesses to reduce payroll costs, again, shifting trends towards temporary work from permanent work. Third, some politicians believe that the Affordable Care Act has created an environment in which it may be more profitable for workers to switch to temporary work over full-time work. So while these factors evidence a structural shift in the US economy that will positively affect ITS, we do believe that there are 2 risk factors for ITS to consider and that we consider in our evaluation. The first is cyclicality risk. The idea that when firms face tough times, when there is a recession, the first to go, the first to be fired are temporary staffers. And as a result, ITS is a very cyclical business, has very unstable cash flows, and that cash flows may go to zero during times of economic downturn. The second main risk factor are low barriers to entry. the regulations needed to start a temp staffing agency are close to nothing. It's actually easier to start a temp staffing business today in America than it is just to open a restaurant. And that allows the potential for new entrants in the market that threaten our competitive advantage. So I've talked to you a little bit about staffing, the broader housing market, and why staffing itself as a larger market is a strong business for growth, is an area where ITS can benefit. The second section of this qualitative assessment of ITS value, thinking about, again, this market, is to go one step narrower, to think about, for example, the housing market in New York City. So in this case, our sub-market is thinking qualitatively about the tech, the IT staffing business. We've seen extremely positive tailwinds in the IT staffing business. We've seen this, it's a fast-growing business, with industry experts saying that it has a growth trajectory projected at growing 13% this year compared to 12% last year. The growth determinants behind this strength in IT staffing include demand for computer programmers, computer systems analysts, database developers, and network administrators. But we're telling you that people are hiring software developers, and that's a demand determinant for IT temp staffing, and that's true. But let's go one step further. Why is there a growing need for IT staffing professionals? We have companies today across all industries becoming tech businesses. As the head of tech investment banking at Goldman Sachs said, even Goldman Sachs itself is becoming a tech business. And in 20 years, it projects that the majority of its clients will classify themselves as tech businesses as well. There are a few indicators of future growth which make us comfortable and excited about the opportunities that face ITS in this IT staffing market. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts a 22% growth in IT jobs over the next decade. And with that 22% growth, ITS and its competitors will be called on to fill those increased need for temp staffing. According to Glassdoor, in the last 3 months alone, employers have posted over 100,000 job openings for developers. Probably the most powerful survey done on how fast IT staffing is growing and how beneficial that can be to ITS is looking at CompTIA's survey. They surveyed employers and found that 43% said that they had difficulty, said that they were understaffed, and that 68% of these firms said they found it difficult and challenging to hire IT professionals. Why is this so significant? We've had a tech boom in the United States since 2000. And yet today, we stand here 16 years later, and still more than almost 3/4 of US businesses find it difficult to hire IT staffing. What that tells us is that the difficulty associated with hiring top-notch IT professionals will remain difficult for the foreseeable future, and that creates a niche, a market need that allows ITS to grow and prosper. John Reed, the consultant at Robert Half Technology, said that the fact is it's very expensive to hire a full-time employee if you don't have a full-time need. Yet how do organizations continue to support technology initiatives that create a competitive advantage in the marketplace? We're seeing more organizations embracing a flexible staffing model, enabling them to have the full-time staff levels they need to maintain average workloads, but also bring in highly skilled subject matter experts to augment their existing staff for peak workloads as well. As specific skill gaps in teams, a flexible staffing approach is cost efficient while remaining nimble as technology initiatives move through typical phases of planning, implementation, and support. The bottom line is that because of the particularly volatile nature of the tech staffing business, we see increasing demand for temp staffings as a permanent part of the broader IT marketplace. With that said, there are risk factors in the IT staffing market as well. First is technology risk. We see that because of the rapid technology change in the IT staffing business itself, we've seen the potential for technology risk, for new entrants to come in with better matching algorithms, with better technology, and to displace ITS. We also see outsourcing of IT staffing, which again threatens our business model and increasing competition. But the bottom line is that when we look at the IT staffing industry, we think that ITS has significant competitive advantages that allow it to overcome these risk factors and make us comfortable and excited about this investment opportunity. The top three competitive positioning, the competitive advantages that we identified are geographic diversity, proprietary matching algorithms, and an ability to deliver quickly. The first competitive advantage is that ITS operates in 16 different metropolitan areas. The result is that ITS is able to serve a vast majority of clients. When a mid-sized corporation with 50 to 100 employees in multiple cities needs an IT staffing firm, they come to ITS because they know that ITS will be able to deliver in all of their home cities. The second competitive advantage are ITS's proprietary matching algorithms. When larger corporations look to find temp staffings, they want the best employees that they can find. With its proprietary algorithms, ITS is able to not only recruit the best talent, but to match the right person with the right job. Third and finally, is its ability to deliver quickly. Sometimes you need an employee to fill a spot in 1 to 2 hours. ITS is known in the business for being one of the most consistent being consistent in its delivery of IT temp staffing professionals. In conclusion, David talked to you in the beginning of this presentation about a housing market and how we were going to value the house that is ITS, this business. I've talked to you about the broader housing market overall and about a subsegment of that market, the quote-unquote New York City housing market, thinking about the staffing business and the IT staffing as a segment of that larger market. I've talked about how staffing is growing, we have a larger pie, but how IT staffing in particular is growing at 12 to 13% per year. But most importantly, we've talked about ITS and why it has a competitive advantage in that growing market, which has led it to achieve a 50% CAGR, growing at more than 4 times the rate of the broader industry. Now that we've talked about a qualitative assessment of ITS, I'll pass it off to my teammates, Brandy and David, who will talk to you a little bit about the quantitative valuation we value ITS. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jack. So the first method we use is the market method. In particular, we use the comparable companies method and the precedent transactions method. So the first thing we're going to look at is our competitors. The competitors in the space vary in size, geography, and target customers. Luckily, they're all in the same industry of staffing. So the 11 competitors we have are similar in that regards, but we want to pick more selective companies based on these factors I just mentioned. So the first one we picked was CDI Corporation, which has engineering and information technology project outsourcing solutions. Our analysis on this company is that it operates internationally and has a tech sector, although there are also other sectors beyond that. The second company we looked at is Hudson Highland Group, Inc., which is a professional staffing and talent management solutions company. It targets small to large-sized corporations, but operates internationally. So again, we're looking at kind of the same customer base here, but a different geography. The third company we're looking at is Kforce, Inc., which provides professional and technical specialty staffing services and solutions to corporations. Here is a technical staffing services company that provides to small and mid-sized companies in the U.S. So this is a very good comparable company in that it matches in geographies and targets a very similar customer base. The fourth company we're looking at is On Assignment, Inc., which provides flexible and permanent staffing solutions internationally and operates in the 4 segments of life sciences, healthcare, physician, and IT engineering. Here, the company operates worldwide, but it has an IT operations segment, so that's why we're going to use a comparable company of On Assignment. Kind of the last company we want to look at is Robert Walters PLC, which is a professional recruitment service company that operates on a permanent, contract, and interim basis. It serves clients in the financial, commercial, and industrial sector, and primarily operates in Europe. So out of these comparable companies that we picked, they were the best because they had the similar geographies, business models, and financial metrics. We wanted to have consistent geographies to make sure that their companies are exposed to similar macroeconomic conditions, and we wanted similar business models to make sure that we're being consistent on a growth and risk measurement. So ITS itself is based in the United States and matches IT professionals with temporary assignment and full-time positions across a range of medium to large-sized corporations. So, as I mentioned before, Kforce, Inc., On Assignment, Robert Walters, CDI, and Hudson Highland Group all have similar characteristics and they also have similar revenue and EBITDAs. In our first numerical analysis that we conducted, we used all of the comparable companies provided in order to calculate out a multiple of EV to EBITDA, which is capital structure neutral, and came out with a value of $310.66 million. Our next valuation was using selective comparable companies, and this was conducted using, again, that EV to EBITDA multiple and using ITS's 2011 EBITDA of $38.6 million. Here, a value of $334.66 million was calculated, which is slightly above what we got in our first analysis. Now we did a precedent transaction analysis as well, and we were given 11 transactions to look at. The third analysis used all of these precedent transactions provided and using a similar EV to EBITDA multiple, calculated out a value of $452.03 million. Our fourth and final valuation using the market method was using selective precedent transactions. So we took a look at the revenues and EBITDAs and found similar, in the similar range to what ITS is, and calculated out a value of $424.93 million, again using EV to EBITDA multiples. So now that I've kind of walked you through what we got in our valuation using the market method, I'm going to pass it over to David, who will go more in depth on our DCF. Thanks.
Thank you, Brandy.
So Brandy basically told you that our neighboring houses, or neighboring companies, are worth approximately $350 million, and they sold for approximately $420 million. What's that gap coming from? It's a control premium. When you sell your company on the private market, buyers have to pay a premium for control of the company. That's the difference you're seeing. Now you're going to bring in the appraiser, that's me, and we're going to walk through the DCF valuation to get a fundamental valuation for our company. Let's start with cash flows. As you can see behind me, the projected cash flows for 2012 are about $19 million. And we project out all the way to 2026, where we project approximately $50 million in cash flow into perpetuity. Let's answer two questions up front. First, why did we project out to 2026? It's because this is a very fast-growing industry with changing margins and changing industry dynamics. It doesn't make sense to model out perpetuity cash flows until we can ensure a steady state transaction. So we waited until we had $50 million so that we could ensure steady state in the long run. Next, we want to look at cost of capital, and we estimated approximately a 12.4% cost of capital. Now, when we look at the industry averages, most companies have a cost of capital between 13 and 15%. The reason these costs of capital are so high is because there's a lot of cyclicality in this industry. So in the case of a recession, you can't diversify away the idiosyncratic risk there because most of the risk is market related. There's a big correlation between the market risk, between the performance of the market overall, and people's need for temp workers. When it comes time for a recession, the first people to get let go are these workers. Overall, what this gives us is a $420 million valuation for the firm. So let's walk through what the reasons for those valuations. First, the income statement. On the income statement, the first thing you're going to want to pay attention to is revenues. On the revenue side of the equation, we're looking at growth rates. Now, we could project out really sky-high growth rates because remember, like Jack told you, this company is growing at about 50% annually. But we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to project out about 8 to 12% growth every year. The reason we're doing that is because we want to make conservative assumptions here on growth, and we don't think that the IT industry is still growing at 50% rates, right? Things are slowing down, things are starting to get more mature. Over the long run, you can notice our cash flows approach approximately 4% revenue growth rate. Again, that makes sense. And then into perpetuity, we're projecting out 2% growth rate. Once this industry matures, once things slow down, then we're going to get about 2% growth into perpetuity. Other things you're going to want to pay attention to in the income statement, the first is depreciation, and the second is CapEx. Neither depreciation nor CapEx really make a big difference for this company because it's not a capital-intensive company. What you are going to want to pay attention to, though, is the effective tax rate and net income. We're modeling out the tax rate to be constant, about 40%, so most of this revenue falls down to net income, which is a good thing. On the balance sheet, a few things you're going to want to pay attention to. First is debt. This company has no debt. Again, we think that makes sense. Maybe this company can tolerate more debt in the future, but right now it makes sense to understand why capital markets are hesitant to give debt to a company whose cash flows are very cyclical. If there's another recession, bondholders fear that this company is not going to be able to pay back principal. look into two key items that are driving net working capital, which is an important component of cash flow. Those two things are account receivable and account payable. The account receivable is changing over time, but you'll notice a 60 days receivable on the balance sheet. That's above average, and we think that there's an opportunity to create value by managing net working capital better for this company. 60 days is too long to collect on your receivables. Account payables are also above average, and we're modeling these into the future, assuming that these inefficiencies remain in place. Finally, let's move to the statement of cash flows. Big takeaway, required cash. Remember, as this company accumulates cash over time, it needs to spend a lot of this cash, but only a small fraction of that cash is actually required to run the business. We're approximating about 7% necessary to run the business. The rest we're going to assume is hypothetically paid out in dividends to you, the board holders, or you can think about it either as paid out to you or kept in the company. Either way, you're getting the discounted present value of those free cash flows. When we summarize this, then, we get a company that's growing at about 8 to 12% annually, that's managing net working capital not very efficiently, but still not destroying too much value there, and it's churning out this cash and returning that to you as the shareholder. Overall, our appraisal shows that this company is worth about $420 million. Next, I'm going to pass it off to Michael. Now, what Michael's going to do is he's going to walk through these competing offers and talk to us about the comparative advantages and disadvantages of these offers, and whether or not they really make sense given that our company is already worth $420 million.
So we walked you through the market. We've walked you through what the different houses on the market are trading at or being sold at. So now let's compare these two offers you have for your valuable house. First, we'd like to start off with Staffco. The key things to consider at Staffco is Staffco's past track record, the current market, and synergies in place. Staffco's past record has been very successful. Unfortunately, this success was prior to the financial crisis. Therefore, we can't assume that any transactions that take place going forward will still have that same success prior to the financial crisis. Prior to the financial crisis, you have transactions that were trading at different premiums, different multiples, and we cannot assume that the same will apply going forward. Second is the current market. Unfortunately, Staffco is not purely IT services as ITS is. We mean this in the sense that Staffco is also trying to grow their accounting, finance, and legal businesses. With this said, a lot of articles in the Wall Street Journal and across industries have shown that accounting and finance are slowly decreasing in growth. That means that more technology is replacing personnel in the workforce. With that said, with the replacement of accounting and finance professionals in the workforce, we'll have increased demand for technology services, particularly those services that companies such as ITS would provide. What this means is that we do not have a symbiotic relationship. ITS is trying to grow their IT business, whereas Staffco is limiting their potential for growth by focusing on growing their accounting and finance business. Therefore, we can't assume that Staffco's incentives will be aligned with ITS's incentives. Next is the synergies in place. First, we'd like to emphasize three things: capital structure, revenues, and costs. Given that we've mentioned that ITS does not have that in place, we do find that this is a strategic incentive going in place currently. However, going forward, we feel as if debt may be able to add value to the firm. Second is the revenue synergies. Although there are revenue synergies that we project out to 10%, we do not feel that these revenue synergies justify the acquisition price of $350 million that Staffco has presented. Lastly is the cost synergies. Here's where we find the most substantial synergies, just because of the nature of the work. Just because everything can be put together and there could be less technology that goes into place for the finance, the accounting, the legal, and the IT services. However, with all this said, we'd like to point out that ultimately, Staffco's present offer would be value dilutive. Similarly, just by looking at comparable transactions in the M&A space, we find that this transaction that Staffco is proposing would mean that ITS is trading at a relative discount to its industry peers. We do not find that, given all the great potential for growth, ITS should accept this position from Staffco. The next offer we'd like to see is the HGE offer. This we like to propose is a strategic buyout with some leverage in place. As we've mentioned, we do not find that currently taking leverage would be profitable to the business just because capital markets wouldn't react to it efficiently. However, going forward, we find that this may be a potential area for growth. Looking at this, we find that the purchase price of $175 million that HGE offers is relatively low. However, we have a 6.8 EV to EBITDA multiple. However, this is for the whole company. What we have to consider is that HGE is only acquiring 40% of the company. So relatively, the EV to EBITDA multiple will be much higher. Next, we look at the strategic IRR. And we say this is a strategic IRR is because the returns on investment are not substantially efficient and not substantial enough to justify what people would call a leveraged buyout. Rather, we find that HGE and their track record presents a strategic incentive for trying to grow companies and working with management going forward. Therefore, there is some value to be said in this HGE offer. However, with that said, we would like to point out that this HGE offer has associated risks, which means that we cannot just assume that the return on investment is enough to justify this acquisition. One is general macroeconomic shifts. Taking debt too early on in ITS's career may prove to be substantially jeopardizing. Second is this execution risk. Synergies and expansion may take longer to fully execute and play out. And lastly is the transaction issues. We have conflicting interests between debt servicers, managers, and the owners. And we have this inability to meet interest payments. With that said, we do not feel that the offer that HGE is trying to present for your house is justified. Lastly, we'd like to show one alternative. Instead of taking on debt with the offer from HGE, we assume that ITS will take on debt in future years in an amount that's relative to its current industry comparables. This is 13.5% of the enterprise value. With that, we find that the actual enterprise value would grow much more than the HGE offer would have, and ultimately conclude that the HGE offer is not substantially value accredited. Lastly, I'd like to pass it off back to David for some closing thoughts.
Thanks, Michael. So basically we've told you these guys are lowballing you. You're putting your house on the market, two guys come, they tell you we're going to pay you $350 million for your house. You look next door, those guys are selling for $400, $415, $450 million. You're asking yourself, is my house worse than their house, or are these guys giving me too low of a price? You bring in the appraiser, and the appraiser tells you, no, your house is really worth $420 million. So your conclusion is, let's put the house up for auction. That's how most people sell their homes. That's how you should sell your company. Let's talk about the auction. We're suggesting a broad M&A process. Bring in a wide range of buyers, let them bid up the price of this company. They're going to pay for the future growth opportunities in this IT space. And there are plenty of strategic buyers, many hundreds more than Staffco, in the staffing industry who want to get into the IT space, who are going to invest heavy capital in growing that business, and who can really scale this business nationally and internationally. So we do think there is a strategic buyer who's going to come and make a compelling offer at about $420 million. But if that doesn't happen, we suggest a roll-up opportunity, funding strategic internal growth by rolling up smaller competitors and taking advantage of economies of scale in this business by being able to serve as an end-to-end provider in various different cities for your clients. Next, you should enter the China market because it's a nascent market with a lot of opportunity for growth, especially in the IT industry, where thousands of jobs are being created every month. And there's an opportunity here to help fill a lot of different temp roles in international markets and in the US market. The major growth drivers here are geographic expansion in the US then, the Chinese market, and rolling up with smaller players. So our overall recommendation is put this company up for a broad sell-side process, wait to bid up offers in an auction. If you get an offer of more than $420 million, sell the company. If not, fund internal growth by buying smaller competitors, entering the China market, and driving long-term growth for the future. Thank you very much. We appreciate you bringing us in to talk to you.